The concept of a 7-year tribulation, a period frequently discussed and often misunderstood within various Christian denominations, is a notion that surprisingly lacks explicit textual support within the Bible itself. This widely propagated idea, which has become a cornerstone of certain evangelical and fundamentalist eschatologies, does not appear as a direct statement in any biblical book. Instead, its origins can be traced to specific interpretations, or rather reinterpretations of particular biblical passages, most notably Daniel 9. The intellectual genesis of this theory is largely attributed to Francisco Rivera, a Jesuit scholar active in the latter half of the 16th century. Rivera's scholarly contributions were made during a tumultuous period in Christian history, marked by the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Church's vigorous Counter-Reformation. During this era, many Protestant reformers, employing a historicist method of biblical interpretation, had identified the Antichrist with the papacy or the institution of the Roman Catholic Church, drawing parallels between prophetic symbols and historical figures or entities. To counter these widespread and damaging accusations, Rivera proposed a radically different eschatological framework, futurism. His innovative interpretation suggested that the prophecies found in the Book of Revelation, particularly those concerning the Antichrist and the end times, were not to be understood as having been fulfilled throughout history or by contemporary institutions. Instead, Rivera posited that these events were entirely future-oriented, yet to transpire in a distinct period, immediately preceding the second coming of Jesus Christ. This strategic theological maneuver served a crucial purpose in the Counter-Reformation, effectively diverting criticisms that linked the Pope or the Roman Catholic Church to the Antichrist. Rivera's futurist perspective proved to be incredibly influential, laying the foundational intellectual and theological groundwork for what would eventually evolve into the modern 7-year tribulation doctrine. Over subsequent centuries, his initial ideas were further developed, refined, and expanded upon by later theologians and commentators, eventually leading to the widespread dispensationalist understanding. This framework typically posits a pre-tribulation rapture, where believers are taken to heaven, followed by a literal and distinct 7-year period of intense global tribulation on earth. The fundamental biblical criticism leveled against this 7-year tribulation theory primarily revolves around its alleged misreading and decontextualization of Daniel 9:27. This pivotal prophetic passage speaks of 70 weeks, a phrase almost universally interpreted as 77s of years, amounting to a total of 490 years. Crucially, the prophecy meticulously details a sequence of events leading directly to the appearance and work of the Messiah, not to a future, disconnected 7-year period that occurs after a pre-tribulation rapture. The critical phrase, 1 week, which futurists typically isolate and assign to a future, unprecedented 7-year tribulation, is understood by a vast majority of biblical scholars and historical Christian theology to refer to the final 7 years of this larger 490-year prophecy. These 7 years are seen as culminating in Jesus' earthly ministry, his atoning death, and the establishment of the new covenant. During this specific 1 week, the prophecy states that a covenant would be confirmed, and sacrifices and offerings would cease. This cessation is widely understood as being profoundly fulfilled through Christ's ultimate and atoning sacrifice on the cross, which rendered all previous temple sacrifices obsolete and unnecessary. Therefore, the historical biblical understanding, grounded in a consistent hermeneutic, views this prophecy in Daniel 9 as having been definitively and completely fulfilled through the person and work of Jesus Christ. This interpretation seamlessly connects the Old Testament prophecies directly to the New Testament's unfolding narrative and the establishment of the Christian faith. There is, consequently, no sound scriptural basis for extracting or isolating a future, distinct, and 7-year period of tribulation from this meticulously fulfilled prophecy. The Bible consistently presents a unified and progressive historical narrative of God's redemptive plan, a plan that finds its ultimate culmination and fulfillment in Christ, rather than a fragmented, futuristic, and speculative timeline that is detached from historical reality and fulfillment. While the specific concept of a 7-year tribulation lacks direct biblical endorsement, the broader theme of tribulation itself is undeniably biblical. Jesus Christ explicitly spoke of tribulation warning his disciples of the hardships they would face in this world, John 16:33. The New Testament frequently refers to the suffering, persecution, and trials endured by believers throughout history, underscoring that tribulation is an inherent part of the Christian experience. However, these biblical references to tribulation do not describe or delineate a specific, globally catastrophic, and precisely timed 7-year period. Instead, they speak to a more general, ongoing period of tribulation that God's people, the church, are destined to endure between the first and second comings of Christ. This tribulation is best understood as the continuous struggle, opposition, and various forms of suffering faced by the church, a reality that has been ever present throughout Christian history, and which will persist until the glorious return of Christ. The belief in a future, distinct, and literal 7-year tribulation period as a separate theological stage is a relatively recent development in Christians' thought, primarily emerging in the last few centuries. This interpretation stands in stark contrast to earlier and more widely held theological perspectives, such as the historicist view. Historicism interprets biblical prophecies as being progressively fulfilled throughout the entirety of church history, from the apostolic age to the present day. Another contrasting view is preterism, which posits that many prophecies, particularly those in Revelation, were largely fulfilled in the 1st century AD, especially surrounding the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Both of these older and more established interpretive methods emphasize the continuous and ongoing nature of God's interaction with humanity and the fulfillment of prophecy within concrete historical contexts, rather than isolating specific future and precisely timed 7-year periods as distinct and unprecedented events. In summation, the widespread theory of a unique and literal 7-year tribulation is not explicitly supported or taught in the Bible. It originated from a particular interpretative framework, predominantly initiated by Francisco Rivera, designed as a polemical response to the criticisms leveled by the Protestant Reformation. A careful and holistic reading of Daniel 9, when considered alongside the broader, consistent, biblical narrative, reveals a comprehensive historical fulfillment of prophecy in the person and work of Jesus Christ. This understanding offers a far more coherent and biblically grounded perspective than one that attempts to carve out a future, distinct, and precisely timed 7-year period of global catastrophe. While the suffering and trials experienced by believers are undeniably real, an ongoing reality that constitutes a continuous tribulation throughout the Christian age, this should not be conflated with a separate, future, and specific 7-year event, as commonly portrayed by the proponents of this particular dispensational theory. The integrity of biblical interpretation necessitates a commitment to textual fidelity and historical context, rather than speculative future predictions.